Hi Charlie.
Hello.
First of all, would you like to tell some words about yourself?
Yeah. I am Colombian originally. I studied philology. Then I had master studies in anthropology, and I have PhD in education, focusing on democratic education and education for social justice.
So now you live in Estonia. How long have you been in Estonia?
In total, it's been 10 years. I came back around 7 months ago from Spain. I lived there for 4 years while I was studying, doing my research.
Why did you decide to come here?
Well, I have an Estonian family. And that was part of the plan since we left Estonia, was to come back at least for some time.
Wife?
Yes, and a child. And then we're here. And I have been continuously working on education and trying to support an Estonian Democratic Education Community.
Okay. Is it a big community?
It is developing. I feel that that locals, there are people who have an interest. Still, you know, Estonia has the reputation of having a good educational system, at least regarding PISA and answering exams. Still, many people agree that there are serious deficiencies with the conventional schooling system, and perhaps in the future it will develop.
Why do you think so?
Well, but people will start seeing the need for a different kind of learning environment for the children. We are in the fourth industrial revolution, scientific revolution, technological revolution. The kind of skills and abilities needed are completely different from those that were devised at the time when schooling was designed, particularly in Prussia, by a military priest called Hermann August Franke. Schools haven't changed much. This is affecting how children develop their curiosity, creativity, divergent thinking, social skills, initiative, sense of responsibility.
Yes. Okay. Would you like to tell in brief about make a brief introduction to democratic education?
Well, it's really difficult to make it brief, but I will try. For 100 years, around 100 years, there have been different kinds of schools. The first wave of this kind of schools happened in Europe. Particularly, there were schools in England, like Summerhill, schools in Spain, like Ferrer Gardia, in France, Freinet, in Belgium, De Crolly, in Italy, Montessori, in Germany, De Geneb, in the Netherlands, the Werkplatz. All these schools had in mind the idea of promoting a different kind of education that would value peace, especially that would take into account children as human beings, not as the recipients of knowledge that was supposed to be needed, but actually as agents in the society, people with interests, with goals, with feelings. The second wave happened during the countercultural movement in the US, particularly, but actually there were schools also in New Zealand, in Ecuador, in Canada. And these schools were basically rescuing the works of these first schools, for instance, the book Summerhill, but they were also nourished by the works of some psychologists like Carl Rogers and non-directivity. These schools started being built as communities where freedom was the most important value. So children were free to explore, to play, to learn from each other, so they were not segregated by age, They were participating in the management of the school, in deciding what kind of subjects they would like to study, and so on. The third wave of democratic education is happening at this moment. There are around 600 schools worldwide. There are a couple of democratic universities. And there is one country which has public schools serving Arab and Jewish children. Well, it's Israel. These are public, these are democratic. And the concept is perhaps blurry when we speak about democracy in schools, right? This is an umbrella concept, so it means that it can change depending on what the communities want to achieve, want to promote. If you check the eudec.org webpage, they will point out two main characteristics. One is self-directed learning. It means children are free to explore and learn what they want, how they want, who they want, when they want. They are not forced to get into the math lesson because a curriculum says so. And the other characteristic would be the participation in the management of the school. It means that the conflicts are solved together in the community. Children are entitled to the same rights and also responsibilities than adults. They can propose workshops or events. And this is basically what the UDEC suggests as the two characteristics. In my opinion, there are more characteristics. One is, for instance, the freedom of movement, association and exploration, meaning that children can organize their day. It's very difficult for a child to decide what they would do with the day. Organize their day as they please. In this sense, free play, especially in the smaller children, is tremendously important. This is the way how they learn about their bodies, learn about themselves, develop the creativity, solve conflicts or learn how to solve them, immersed in a democratic community in which adults are not making judgments about children, judging them or being authoritarian, but rather being close to them, helping them develop these social skills which are so important nowadays, especially to employers, but in general, to our societies, how to speak, how to listen to the other. And there is also this idea of age mixing, which is really important. I mentioned August Hermann Franke. This guy was a military priest, devised schooling as a situation in which there would be a set of contents that should be enforced onto children in a linear way, hence the division by age. It's not because they learn better, because they are at a certain age then they would learn something different. The reality is that if it was the case of stages of development, then we would have classes with children from 7 to 12 years old, from 12 to 15 and then on. The reality is that the division by age is just meant to cover a set of contents. What research shows is that when you have age-mixed groups, children are more calm, they learn from each other, they are able to protect the most vulnerable, and in general it alleviates a lot the climate of the school, of these learning spaces. So in brief, this is more or less what democratic education is. Of course, it's tremendously important, the role of adults and how people in these environments develop positive relations to children. Now there are lots of doubts and people would question whether these children can go to university or not. That was one of my questions in my research. So I found researchers in the US and in the UK. I did my own in Spain with the alumni of such schools. The findings were just, predictable in a way, but they were really interesting. These are people who, around the age of 14, they had already identified their passions. They understood that if they wanted to, for instance, go to universities, they needed to take some exams, so they would enroll in the school. The last grade in Estonia would be 9th grade. And they would just get into the schooling system in order to get a diploma to be able to continue studying further. But they had developed the skills which are so important nowadays: learning to learn, strong self-esteem, understanding of who they are, positive self-image, this ability of negotiating, treating with others who are different. These are what nowadays are being called as 21st century skills. However, we feel that in schools we need more iPads and more computers to make it happen. These schools show that it is not the case. What you need is a democratic community in which people are respected and they get the dignity they deserve.
Okay, that's good. Do you have some examples of such schools in the world?
There are plenty, yeah.
Where?
You can find, well, on the one hand, you can look for the International Democratic Education Network. If you want me to tell you names, it could be Sudbury schools. There is Albany Free School.
And countries as well.
In countries?
Yes.
Yeah, well, they are almost everywhere, to be honest. The United States, in England, there are some in the Netherlands. There are at least 8, as much as I understand. In France, during the last 5 years, something like 20 schools have been opened. Spain is also a laboratory for this kind of alternative visions of schooling. Israel is the only country that sponsors democratic schools to make them public and affordable to everyone. Russia has some communities doing the same. Poland has around 3-4 schools like this. Germany has lots of schools. In Latin America it is developing. Asia, Japan has also many of those.
Okay.
It's everywhere.
Learn from each other. What do you mean? Learn from each
What
other.
do I mean is, well, in this I will borrow the words of Jakob Hedge, which is the founder of the Democratic School of Hadera. In a democratic school, everyone is a learner and everyone is a teacher. It means that if a child wants, a child can organize a workshop and teach the others or help them learn, right? But it doesn't have to be, structured learning as we know it, or formal learning. What you could see in these spaces is that older children help smaller children start writing the first words, or they are reading together, and smaller children are learning through the imitation, through connecting the dots, basically. In the school where I did my research, there was one day a boy came out with the idea to the general meeting, the school meeting, saying that he wanted to build a geodesic dome, structure, huge. Nobody in the school knew how to build it, but the adults in this place, the staff, they were ready to find help. They found an architect close to the community who was willing to help them. When the architect was in place, other children from different ages joined the project. It lasted 2 years. It took them 2 years to build this dome. And inside of this process there was lots of learning. They learned math, they learned geometry, they had to cut all the wood pieces and so on. They learned carpentry.
From each other.
From each other and from the adults, yeah.
So it's a teacher's free school, yeah? Or teachers should just maybe control or watch?
No. The teacher could be of any age. When you have a specific topic which demands a certain skill and ability, yes, many times the school finds a teacher or invites somebody close to the community. There was somebody who is from India, Sugatra Mitra. He was an IT guy. He owned his own community, his own company, sorry. And he was staring out of the window. Next to his office there was a slum, and children were just wandering there, didn't go to school. These were Tamil children. What he did was revolutionary. Actually, he just released a film about it. He opened a hole in the wall, and that is the name of the experiment, the hole in the wall. He put there a computer, waterproof and dustproof, with an internet connection. And he just left it there and recorded the whole thing. What he saw were children, out of curiosity, coming to the computer, starting to find out that, if I move the mouse, then the pointer is moving. If I click here, then something opens. If I write some word, then information comes. After, I think it was like 8 months, Tamil children, started learning English on their own. Other children started finding information for their homework. Other children started teaching each other how to read. It is not, democratic education doesn't mean the death of teachers. It means that we as teachers, I am a teacher, we change, we evolved. We become facilitators of resources. We become facilitators of opportunities, learning opportunities for the students. We establish meaningful and positive relationships with them. This is something that is not so common, unfortunately.
You talked about segregated by age school,
Yeah.
but what about segregated by nationalities school? Like
of course not.
here in Estonia.
Many of
How do you have a receipt, a proposal how to solve this problem in Estonia? Which two divided communities, yes, Russian and
when I studied anthropology here,
yeah.
in this same university, Tallinn University, my research project was about integration in education at an Estonian school. What I found was that they had lots of materials, videos, they had books. This was a small town, small school where there were mixed children, Russian-speaking children, Estonian-speaking children. Unfortunately, there were structural obstacles to that. Like the Russian lessons were extremely boring for Estonian children. They were repetitive, old school grammar.
Because of teachers.
Probably they didn't know a different way. And they were Russian-speaking teachers. But also non-structural issues as well. Communities in many cases don't communicate with each other. What was funny and interesting in the end, my opinion is that everybody in this country, including myself, should be bilingual, Estonian and Russian. I tell you the anecdote of I was working in that school. My two colleagues, she was the Russian teacher, Russian speaking. She was the Estonian teacher, Estonian speaking. The Estonian teacher would speak in Russian to the Russian teacher, and the Russian teacher would reply in Estonian, naturally. The thing is, taking into account the history of Estonia, obviously language is very important. And I completely agree that, it's part of the culture and it should be preserved. But in the end, language might become the most important part of the communication, not what we are saying. And this is an issue. In these schools, what you see is that in many cases, unless children decide or feel that they need more structured lessons, there are no language lessons. So you have children learning from each other. I remember the case of an older boy who was in charge of the carpentry, helping an English boy build a wooden sword. And the Spanish boy was trying to practice his English, and the English boy was eager to help develop the language. And this is how people learn the language. I speak Estonian. I didn't take any course. I learned it naturally. I can speak with certain limitations. I'm lacking vocabulary, of course.
Good for you.
Good for me, perhaps, but I had the interest. I had the motivation. The exam that I made yesterday, I took yesterday, the B1 exam. The people around me were mostly were Russian-speaking people, born in this country, who had serious problems speaking in Estonian, but perhaps because they didn't need it, because in their circle there was always Russian, they didn't have this need, right? So I feel that people should worry more about what they are saying than actually the language they are speaking.
Why Estonian education system needs to be changed? What do you think?
No, that is an answer that you should ask. That's a question you should ask to Estonians. If they feel, to Estonian and Russian speaking people in Estonia, if they feel that the Estonian educational system needs to be changed, then they would do something to change it. For me, having visited and having had contact with schools in different countries around the world, Estonian schools are no different from Colombian schools or Spanish schools. They are based on the same. You remember August Hermann Franke? It's exactly the same. Segregation by ages, the division of subjects, exams in the end, memorization, discipline, order, authority of the teacher, be quiet.
Obey.
How was your experience in school?
Yes. And why is it bad for school children and for country?
I cannot even find a reason why it could be good, the way we are having schools at this moment. We are having a high percentage of unemployment. We are having young people who finish school without any idea what they would like to do in the future. We have apolitical citizens who don't get involved in what is happening in their communities. We have lots of bullying, which has to do with abuse, many times by adults to young people. No, I would like to see what is the research, the scientific research evidence that this schooling system is actually appropriate to help young people become good people.
What do you mean freedom of movement in school?
Well, in conventional schools, you don't have freedom of movement. You have to be sitting, you have to be in a classroom. Usually these schools have different prepared environments. They have a room which has to do with a library. They had another room which has mathematical games. They have another room which is for craft. Another room which is for physical movement. Children are allowed to roam to different rooms. Now there are rules. With freedom, you also get limitations and limits. The limits have to do with the use of material, with the treatment to other people. So this is not about chaos. There are rules. The difference is how these rules are made and enforced. Children are all the time involved into those processes. This makes these rules natural. If they don't like a rule, they can change it. And then they will see what happens. In many cases, it works. In many others, they don't. It doesn't work. So they go back to, appealing to collective wisdom, trying to find out. Adults in these spaces are voices of common sense. We want to smoke indoors. Some young people might say that. So an adult can say, there are other people who don't want to smoke, don't want to ruin their lungs. If you are in age to smoke, then we need to organize another place outside of the school, because this is a place where you cannot smoke, right? This is basic health provisions. But this empowerment affects directly the sense of belonging that children have. When that happens, then you stop having bullying, and if you have any bullying, you solve it through the school meeting. Increases the involvement of children into learning activities which are meaningful to them. And it generally affects positively the climate of the school. So you find that children are happy, that children are proactive, that they want to participate.
Learn how to solve conflicts. Why is it important? You mean to learn some psychological skills, yes?
No. What I mean is to develop the skills to communicate with others, to try to find middle ways, to try to, instead of appealing to the majority rule, we will take into account also the minority and try to find solutions that satisfies everybody. That this is what nowadays employers, the job market is referring to as social skills. This has to do with how am I able to work with others who are different from me? How do we find solutions together to different problems? Divergent thinking. You know. How do I relate, with society? How do I self-regulate? I don't see a problem with that.
And you focused on human beings, agents of society, not biorobots. Yeah.
Of course.
So why is it important?
Not to produce robots?
Yes. 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 It's a funny question. Yes, but a system learn children to obey. Yes. I mean, to obey and be like soldiers of system. Yes. Like slaves. Yes. And to do what authorities want to do. Yeah. And you would like to grow up free citizens. Yeah. Okay. That's good. That's so good. So it's important to have empathy as well. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Why?
Well, perhaps it is important to care about the most vulnerable. Perhaps the feeling of community is the one that has been helping us for the last 100,000 years to, even longer, 200,000 years, being Homo sapiens. We need to stick to each other. We need to help each other. That's how we grow, not economically, as human beings.
So, but in my point of view, this idea of educational system undermines the current system, yes, and could change the society, yeah.
Absolutely, there is a researcher.
It will be more difficult to manage people, yes, to rule maybe. No?
Well, it depends. If you find, there was absolutely. There was a couple of researchers who analyzed the World Value Survey during the last, it was from 1992 to 2006 or something like this. And they were focusing on the perceptions of the support to democratic attitudes and behavior in citizens. They found out that people who have low educational capital and cultural capital tend to support more authoritarian regimes. This is what we are seeing in Hungary, in the US. I don't know if in Russia. I will let it for you to answer it. Yes, absolutely. If we believe that this is our society and not only the rulers. Yes, but it's also about what kind of society we want. We continue keeping the idea that this is in balance. This is not in balance. Our economical system is built upon the premise that resources are limitless. They are not. We are affecting deeply our world. And this is also a component of democratic education, is this environmental awareness. It's this empathizing. It's this building together, not for me to become richer, but rather for all of us to live a good, meaningful life. Perhaps, I don't know if it is bad that we are thinking of a different kind of system. I'm not talking about the end of the nation state. I'm talking about the nation state and their resources being for people. This is not about communism or socialism. This is about not having people sleep.
Humanism.
Yeah, in a way, but not only humans at the center of everything. It's about human beings as part of a system, an environmental system, an ecological system. We are destroying it. Schools are doing very little for that.
Did you contact the Ministry of Education of Estonia and share your ideas?
In that process we are, yeah.
What?
We are in that process.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Max. Was
Wish
a
you all
pleasure.
the best, Charlie.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure that I know some people in Russia who are working on this, and you know, they have all the support of the people who understand that children are human beings, who have a voice and who need to have rights also.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Cheers.